3, 2, 1. What's going on, folks? Welcome to 34 Questions. Tonight, I have a very special guest. Mr. Darren Shelton is in the building. How you doing, Mr. Shelton?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Definitely appreciate your time and your openness to just come on and share your story. I know it's not easy for everybody, so definitely appreciate the energy you bring. My very first, actually, before I get to that, for the folks unfamiliar with the show, the flow of the show is we do a few intro questions, a little warm up just to set the tone. And then I have a little icebreaker for you as well thrown in there somewhere. And then after that, we jump into the main portion of the interview where you choose a number between 1 and 34 and we get the conversation rolling that way. How's that sound to you, Mr. Shelton?
Sounds like a plan. I'm looking forward.
For sure. Well, my very first question for you is, how have you been? It's definitely been a crazy year. It's crazy times. You've been doing well. You've been going through it. How you been?
Good. Very, very blessed. Highly favored, I believe is the phrase. You're right. It has been tough. But I think what's been interesting over the course of the last year is in the midst of challenges, there's been a lot of opportunities. And we've seen not just resilience from people, we've seen remarkable innovation. People's will to not only survive, but to help others, to adapt, to find ways. I've got friends that started businesses during the middle of the pandemic and have done well, just had a chance to celebrate a 1-year anniversary with some of them. And so I'm excited to be a part of people who are not willing to give up, but are instead going to overcome.
For sure. What do you think's been, for you personally, what's been the biggest positive that came out of the quarantine?
Biggest positive for the quarantine. Not a whole lot of people probably look at the quarantine in terms of their positives. I had a chance, as many people did, to spend a lot of time with my family when everybody was kind of sheltering in place, whatever that looked like for different people as we tried to sort things out. I had a chance to encourage a lot of people. I think maybe one thing that's been a positive, and not necessarily so much for me, but I count it as a big positive, is seeing people overcome fear. At the very beginning of this, a lot of people were very afraid. Nothing like this has ever happened in our lifetimes. And, even for some of our senior citizens who, many of them went through World War II and they went through the Korean War, Vietnam, they'd still not ever seen anything like this. So to see people reconcile their fears and find ways to live and thrive, while I personally didn't have a whole lot of fears going into it, I'm going to take that as a collective win for the team. I'm glad to have seen us come out with that positive.
For sure. And just another follow-up to that, is there any particular fear that you had that you maybe overcame during quarantine, or is that just in general kind of thing?
Yeah, no, more in general. I don't want to make it sound like I'm entirely fearless. I suppose there's always something out there lurking in the shadows that might give us a little scare. But, I made this statement early on and I still stand by it. I refuse to live in fear of a virus. And I'm just, I'm not going to live my life in fear of something like that. For me, the odds of me dying are probably a whole lot higher from something other than a virus. I'm just not going to live in fear of that. That doesn't mean I don't respect it. Or that I don't recognize, the danger that it certainly is to many people. We all probably know of some people who not only suffered greatly, but some who may have succumbed to the virus. And so we appreciate that it is something that we need to be mindful of. I really hope, that people have taken the time to become more conscious of what wellness means in terms of, addressing issues around inflammation and nutrition and making sure people are getting a lot of rest. None of that's a silver bullet, but all of it is extremely helpful. And if there's anything that I personally probably had to face, it was that, and say, hey, you don't live forever. And if there's anything that you could be doing and you should be doing, well, then do that. nothing changes if nothing changes. And so I personally, over the course of the last year, lost some weight, tried to do some things to increase my, immunity, eating less sugar, taking more vitamins, doing the good stuff, so I don't want to look back at 2020 as a negative. I want to look at it as a positive. I want to see positive changes that people make.
For sure. I'm glad to hear that you made those changes for yourselves. Health is wealth to some people out there, so definitely important to take care of yourself, and I'm glad to hear that you've been working on it. I know for my folks, it's something that I'm still trying to get them to embrace and kind of help change their lifestyles a little bit, but it's a struggle, so I know it's hard to break habits. I'm a big sugar person. I feel like I'm still young enough to feel like I'm invincible, but I know it's catching up to me.
Sure.
Yeah, but real quick. All right. Well, before we go any further, I do have an icebreaker for you. It's a one-word spelling bee. Are you open to it, or would you rather pass?
I love spelling bees. I may not do very well on it, but I'll take a stab.
All right. It's just one word, and tonight your word is perseverance.
Perseverance. Perseverance. Perseverance.
100% correct. Congrats.
I have achieved my goal for the day. I can sleep well tonight. I got that word right. It's a great word, by the way. Thanks. I think it's a great word. It's a very timely word considering what we were just talking about.
Exactly. To be honest with you, this is part of a list that I Google searched 100 most misspelled words in the English language, but who knows? Anyways, what was I going to say? Oh, I forgot. I had a fleeting thought. My apologies. Moving on, we do have a few more warm-up questions.
Sure.
This next one is, now I remember. Because you got that word right, you will be invited back to the 34 question spelling bee episode whenever I can figure out the logistics of it. I know it's hard with a bunch of people coming in, but
no, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, a bunch of other guests who've gotten their word right. You guys are going head to head to see who's a champion.
That might be a very short-lived contest, but yeah, that'd be fun
for sure. Again, moving on. This next question is: what would you like the audience to know about you?
Well, that's an interesting question, since obviously your audience is diverse and somewhat unknown to me in that particular context. So what would I like your audience to know about me? Someone told me very recently, they said, that when I walk in the room, the atmosphere changes, and I wasn't quite exactly sure what to make of that. Perception is reality, and it's interesting. We have our perceptions of things, of people, of life, of situations, and others have their perceptions of us. And we obviously have no way to know how accurate someone else's perception of us is. And in fairness, maybe we don't know ourselves as well as we think we do. Maybe if we had insights into how others think of us, it would give us pause, or maybe even the opportunity to refocus on perhaps aligning ourselves between how we are perceived and how we would like to be perceived. So when I think of your question, what would I like the audience to know about me? Or if I could say it differently, how would I prefer the audience to perceive me? I look at myself as being someone who has thrived on facing challenges, and maybe to a certain degree at times even sought out challenges. That doesn't mean I was seeking out problems. Life brings its own fair share of those. I don't know that I like problems. I think I do like problem solving. And that can either be proactive or reactive. And in fairness, it's probably hard to proactively solve problems until you've had a chance to reactively solve problems a few times. Only then do you have the insight needed to perhaps correct in advance. So I don't know if that's a typical answer that you might get to that. I certainly don't have a, athletic record or anything like that. I didn't make the winning shot in a basketball game 25 years ago. No war stories like that. But I have enjoyed, some at this stage, 30 years of looking at challenges, staring them down, and trying to come up with a solution so that maybe, hopefully, the next generation didn't have to deal with that same problem, at least the same way.
That was a terrific answer. No wrong answers here, and everyone has their own way of answering the questions. But definitely appreciated the insight that you shared. Thank you for that. My second question for you is, if someone were to pay you a tribute, how would you like to be honored? If I was going to tell myself today I'm going to do something in honor of Darren Shelton, what could I do?
It's a great question. And if someone was going to do that just in the way that you laid that out, they were going to do a thing in honor or tribute of me. I suppose if they were to express kindness to people. We live in a world where so many people so rarely get true kindness. They may get placebo kindness or pseudo kindness, where someone's just being polite, and politeness is in and of itself probably lacking the way that it should be. We live in a society that's increasingly distracted and entertained to a place where kindness is just not maybe what it used to be. So if people could simply engage in more deliberate, intentional acts of kindness, maybe even seek out opportunities to express their care and love for fellow man, I think that would certainly do a lot for this particular generation. And in fairness, if they were to do that in tribute of me, I would prefer they just simply do it honoring me in their mind without ever saying anything to express it, because if anything, I'm a beneficiary of the kindness of so many other people.
I gotcha. And I'll definitely do that for you one of these days. No worries. And then
Thank you.
No worries. This last question actually goes back to something you had mentioned about perception and how others may perceive you. But this is more of a self-perception question. On a scale from 1 to 10, how well do you know yourself?
Great question. Well, we don't know what we don't know. And, so I can sit here and, if I told you a 10, well, I'd definitely be lying. If I told you 1, then that would certainly be probably far too telling. I think that I probably would have to, if I was giving a number to it, go with 7.5, 8. I want to leave myself a little bit of wiggle room on the high side for not knowing myself maybe as well as I would like to. But I think at this stage in my life, I probably know myself fairly well. And good or bad, there's probably a high degree of predictability for me about me. I can typically tell you, well, don't do that, Darren, because if you do that, that's going to lead to this. And, it's just generally best if I don't look at a donut, because I know what's going to happen right after I look at that donut. So I'm going to go with 7.5.
Solid number. That happens to be probably the most answered number for this question. Sure. Yeah, it's very interesting. I'm still trying to see a pattern, and people land.
You're going to have a very interesting data set if you're, paying much attention to these things.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I'm already noticing. I haven't been organized about it just yet, but once I finally hunker down and take a re-listen to all the episodes, I'm definitely going to be writing down some stats for sure. And then a follow-up to that question is, what's your favorite thing about your personality?
Huh. My favorite thing about my personality, I would have to say it's my great sense of humor, if not my overwhelming sense of modesty. Maybe with that in mind, I should comment on my sharp sense of sarcasm. It's an interesting, I was talking to a friend of mine today. We were talking about, how we're perceived. And so I have spent 25 years in the maritime industry, which has been just a fantastic experience. But by the nature of what I've done, is often involved in situations that most certainly some people would consider to be, I don't want to use the word hostile environments, but there was moments of confrontation. That's just the nature of the work. And so it's become increasingly more obvious to me that I'm going to use the phrase an unconscious dominance. Just by my nature, sometimes although I don't think of myself this way, I've been told this several times in the not so distant past that, I kind of come in with a certain sense of authority. And that's not necessarily a good or a bad. It's just, certain people have certain demeanors and then that can, what's interesting about this is other people can perceive, this guy comes in from an authority type perspective and, maybe confrontational, which not necessarily the case, but then that's going to cause a impact on them. Maybe they come in very defensive and unnecessarily so. So I know that I personally, as it regards to my own personality, have tried to become more mindful of that so that there would not be a misunderstanding around something that need not be there, if I can say it in that particular way. I think it's very, very helpful. And I like your question, and for no other reason, because it's important for us to be self-reflective. The question you ask is really, a question I've never asked myself before. What do I like about my personality? It's not what do other people like about my personality. What do I like about my personality? That's a great question because it's not one that we typically think about. And maybe we should. Maybe we should be considerate of how others think of us, but how do we think of us? And if there's a part of our personality that we don't like, imagine that would be the thing that would be easier for people to answer in some cases, what they don't like about their personality.
Absolutely.
But if we think about the one, maybe it leads us to the other, and maybe it collectively leads us to being a better person, just simply because we were more mindful.
Yeah, thank you for that. I never really fully understand the impact of these questions sometimes because I'm not thinking about it in that sense of, I'm trying to direct this person to think this way. It's more so something from my curiosity that kind of comes out. But yeah, most definitely self-reflection, I think is huge. So one thing about me is the way I'm weird is that I do think about these questions and I do like to talk about these things with other people. Not everybody is open to that or, is interested in, participating in that kind of conversation.
Sure. Yeah.
So, yeah, I know for some people, maybe they wouldn't have perceived that question like you just had, they might feel a little intrusive about it. But sure. Definitely that's something that, I try to create this space so it's a welcoming space to talk about these things where there isn't as much judgment, because I get it. I understand someone just bringing up a topic like that. It's kind of like, I don't know you. Why am I telling you these things?
Yeah.
But yeah, you have anything else to add? Yeah?
Well, I was just sitting. No, not necessarily, but I guess maybe my curiosity runs somewhat parallel to yours, and certainly, yeah. People ask you that kind of a question is one that, as I mentioned, not only do people not think about it, but when asked, it causes such a surprising respect, of self-awareness that most people are not used to doing. And so their reaction is not necessarily offense at what would be the seeming intrusiveness of the question, but to a certain degree, the fact that they're just so caught off guard by thinking of themselves that way and then trying to not only analyze, but articulate around that. That's one of those questions that people will probably go to sleep thinking about, noodle on the next day, maybe try and weave it into a conversation with their mother or their best friend. To really just, if they are truly curious about it, to really think about themselves. So it's a great question, and I can appreciate why, if you've asked it of other people, they probably struggled to frame an answer around it. But it's a great question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Just moving on.
Sure.
We've made it to the main portion of the interview. Those were just the warm-up questions. So.
All right.
Yeah. So there's 3 levels. I think you've read the document. There's an easy, medium, hard. It's all subjective to what I think people would have a hard time answering. Which level would you like to start off with?
Why don't you start easy and work your way up? I mean, there's no sense in me trying to hit the home run here in the first question.
No worries. All right. Going on the easy level, give me your first number between 1 and 34.
So, without even me looking or knowing, we'll just split the middle and go with 17.
17. If money and time didn't matter, what would you choose to do?
If money and time didn't matter. People have, used the phrase for eons, I suppose, that time is money, time is money. I remember hearing that so often. Time is money, and the truth is that time is not money. Time is far more valuable than money. If you had all the money in the world, you wouldn't be able to buy yourself another second of time. You had all the time, you could accumulate all the money in the world. So if I had time and money, if neither mattered, what would I do? Well, I would do everything, I suppose. If I had all the time and the money, what would I not do? Would you live forever and have unlimited resources? So, people can be very selfish with that, but in honesty, if you really think about the question, and if both parts of it are true, I could do everything. I could be both selfish and selfless throughout eternity, per se. That,
No.
What would you do? Can you think about that? I could do anything. I could do everything. I could do all of everything. You get bored with that pretty quickly. You'd get, sure, at some point, but think about it. You can go anywhere. You can do anything. You can eat any food, go on any vacation, drive any car, have any house. You can build any business. You can, whatever. Wow. That's supposed to be one of the easy questions?
Yeah, it's supposed to be one of the easy questions. But I can see you think deep about these things, and I definitely appreciate that. That was a whole different way. That's the first time someone's brought it.
You were waiting for me to say I'd buy a Maserati and go ski the Swiss Alps or something.
Yeah. So I guess when you put it in that way, it's true. And I think for myself, if I was in that position, then I'd be spending a whole lot of my time trying to find that balance. Like you were talking about being selfishness and selfless. I think that's one of those things. Like, do I, just dedicate my life to making the world a better place? But that's also very draining. Maybe I couldn't do that all the time. So I could see myself doing it in pockets of time, maybe,
Well, and if you ask that question to a 21-year-old and an 81-year-old, you're going to get very different answers. And I, kind of split the middle on those ages. And, depending upon at what stage in my life, all of a sudden I had enough money or time where neither was a concern, would certainly change, would certainly influence my answer to that. At this stage today, if money and time were not an issue, I would do a lot of stuff, with my family, with my friends, and for the communities that I have the privilege of serving, trying to help others advance causes and, really be a voice of hope and change in any way that I could. If money and time weren't an issue, then those would probably be my priorities.
For sure. Let's go ahead and throw me another number.
Oh, well, let's go with 21.
21, still on easy, but
Okay.
what's been your greatest highlight? Something that maybe an achievement that you're particularly proud of. What's been your greatest highlight?
Now that's as equally tough as some of the others. I've been very privileged. I've had a chance to do a lot of things. I have shared the stages, plural, with governors and congressmen. I've had the honor of being a commencement speaker at graduations. I have ministered at funerals and weddings. I've dedicated babies. I've had the privilege of being a husband to a beautiful wife, father to some amazing daughters. I've had a chance to serve on different boards, whether it's college boards or industry boards. For me to go back and pick one highlight from all of those things is incredibly difficult. And I suppose if I had to, I'm going to say, and I know this sounds somewhat, I hope it doesn't sound arrogant or superficial, but I'm going to go with the cocktail highlight in that I've had a chance to do all of those things. I've had a chance to be a part of some very amazing opportunities, and every one of those weaves into the fabric of a person's life. I know this would sound odd to people, but I've had the privilege of standing by the bedside of a number of individuals as they crossed from this life into the next. And it's allowed me to frame, I don't want to, make it sound too cliche, the meaning of life. I've had a chance to do some amazing things. And the fact that I've had a chance to do all of those things, that may be the collective highlight.
Thank you for sharing. I would totally agree. If I was able to do all those things too, it would be hard for me to choose one. But yeah, that sounds like it's been amazing. Life's been an amazing ride for you.
Yeah, well, and hopefully we got a little bit left of it, so we'll see. Maybe we'll have a different highlight if we have this conversation 10 years from now.
Cheers to many more.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
We're here.
Before we get you to choose another number, I actually have a curveball for you.
All right.
This one is a fill in the blank question.
Okay.
And for you, it is, I'm too young to blank.
I'm too young to be forgetting all the stuff that I seem to be forgetting.
I mean, does it happen often? I mean,
it happens too often. I'll put it that way. And it's simple stuff, I usually can still remember what day of the week it is or where I'm supposed to be in another 10 minutes. But I was at an event earlier this evening and I kept looking at this gentleman and I'm like, I know the guy. I knew the guy, but I just couldn't think of his name. And finally I turned to a friend of mine and I'm like, this is dumb. I'm not going to sit here and keep grinding the last bit of, faculties I have left today. who is that guy? And he told me his name. We're like, okay, absolutely. So that's happening a little too often. It's typically associated with a lack of coffee at a certain time of the day. So, but yeah.
What's your go-to whenever someone approaches you where you feel like you should know them and they seem to know you? Are you like a, hey, guy, or?
Well, usually if I will, in that situation, and it does happen, I know a lot of people and I go to a lot of events and there's 1,000 things running through my brain. And so, but to answer your question, I'm not acting like I know them. I do know them. And I will approach it from that perspective and just wait for the name to catch up with me. And usually it does. A minute or so into the conversation, the other stuff will kind of clear out. But I will tell you one thing that helps in that situation is really just to focus on the person. As I mentioned, you're sitting there, you got all these other thoughts that are running through your brain. Just push those out to the side and just focus on that person, that conversation. And just the clarity of that usually allows the name to slip through the crack, and all of a sudden you're not feeling as dumb as you did 30 seconds prior.
I gotcha. I'm gonna have to try that. I normally try to find someone for me to introduce them to. I'd be like, hey, this is Chris, and then I wait for them to say their name.
Sure, yeah. So I will say this: there was a gentleman that was a very special part of my life, and his name was James Kilgore. He was a pastor, minister, traveled internationally. The man, through his lifetime, shook hundreds of thousands of hands. And when you would see him, he would remember your name. And it would always just surprise you. You're like, you know way too many people to remember my name. You haven't seen me in however long. How could you possibly remember my name? And you just had to know that in his mind, there were tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of names. I've always admired that skill amongst those who had mastered it. And, I very much covet, maybe, I try not to covet too many things, but maybe I will covet that, because that is a very desirable skill to have, that level of memory association.
Yeah, no doubt. That kind of segues perfectly into what I was going to ask you next, which was, intelligence. Something you had brought up off camera before we had started rolling. You mentioned, was it emotional EQ?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, EQ. So instead of IQ, EQ, emotional intelligence.
Can you kind of, in a nutshell, kind of describe that to me? That's something I haven't really dove into at all.
Sure. Well, I don't want to do disservice to it. I'll tell you, a few years ago, I was going through some hiring processes where I was hiring some, college interns, and I tried to formulate a set of questions that I would use during a twofold interview process, where I would first do, a phone call, ask a few questions, and then if I could say, score the calls. And then, if I made 10 calls, maybe I would try and work it down to 3 or 4 in-person interviews. And so my goal was to really try and peel back the layers of the onion, as it were, in getting to know the person. And so EQ questions are designed around that, so it could be simple stuff. Instead of me asking, do you like to read? I would ask you, what book have you been reading lately? And your answer would be telling if it was fiction, nonfiction, the type thereof. And there's not a right or wrong answer to it. It's just, let me ask questions in a way that will help me better understand this individual. Much like what you are doing here in, the script, the style, the format that you're employing, which I think is great. I think the style of questions is great. So, but yeah, that's EQ, and it's worth looking it up. It's worth trying to incorporate it into any area of your life where you just kind of weave in a few questions that really cause people to, kind of show their hand a little bit about who they are so that you could. And for me, those questions on the hiring side were really just around culture. I wanted to make sure that I was hiring people that would, fit in well for the team that they were going to be joining and then themselves. I didn't want to bring anybody in that if I thought, this won't be optimal for them, because I think that's a really important part in the hiring process. It's not just about skills. It's, are you going to be a happy person here? So anyway, I went way past answering your EQ question.
No, that was great. And I think if a lot more people kind of went through the hiring process like you did, they would be in the places that they were happier working at. I definitely find the value in that, and something I wish, I would come across more often in the hiring process. As a person looking for a job.
Sure.
But
sure.
Yeah, and definitely appreciated that, the context you're giving me as far as, these questions, because, like I mentioned earlier, it's not something that I think of, but stuff that I realize as more people share their perspectives with me. So appreciate that as well.
Yes, sir.
All right. Let's jump into another number. You still want to stay easy, or?
Oh, let's dial it up a little bit. How about we go with, I don't know, medium 4.
Medium 4. Do you consider yourself religious or spiritual?
Well, I didn't know that was the question, but that's a good one. So yes, both religious and spiritual, which are different. I do have the privilege of serving as a pastor of a Christian church. So I'm sure that everybody would, well, there's probably a couple people that probably wouldn't think I was too religious, but we won't go there. No, it's, religious and spiritual, I don't know if most people, how they look at those differently. A person can be religious, and religious can be, alluding to the ceremonial parts of religions. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily spiritual in and of itself. I'll say this, and I don't want to go too deep, but everyone has the propensity to have a spiritual nature. And that would imply that they're getting beyond just the carnal nature of a person, which the carnal is common to all man. But when you look at that deeper spiritual person and you begin to dissect the spirit from the flesh, so even at a seemingly non-spiritual level, I would say that everybody has the capacity to be spiritual. It would probably be helpful if more people understood that side of themselves. But yes, for me, religious, spiritual, both.
For sure. I gotta say, this is our first time meeting, and I think the impression I've gotten from you is that you're a very deep thinker. And have you always been a deep thinker, like growing up, or was it something that kind of came along as you were experiencing life?
Well, so you're kind. I personally, I understand and acknowledge what you are saying. I don't necessarily think of myself as a deep thinker, but in fairness to you and in fairness to some of the other questions that we've went through, as I self-reflect, maybe you're right. Now, to the question that you just asked, I've probably always been very curious. So my grandmother, my paternal grandparents had a set of World Book encyclopedias that they had bought for my father and his siblings. I think my father is probably the one who made the most use of them just from when they purchased them at that stage in his life. And then my father and my mother bought a set of World Book encyclopedias for myself and for my sister. And I commandeered them. I was the custodian of them, meaning that they had to stay in my room. I don't think my sister was trying to argue too much on that particular point. But yeah, I would get them down and I would just read random things from history, about presidents and, famous figures of the past. And I would sometimes kind of dive off a little more into the esoteric on is time travel possible and things like that. And then I guess as I matured, I read a lot. And there's a book, and it's an interesting book. I don't know if I'm suggesting it, but I'll just throw it out there. There's a book titled The Great Thoughts. And it's really a collection of quotes around certain things that are philosophical. And I have that book. I don't have it. It's in one of my other offices. And I do, when I was younger, I suppose I looked at it more, and I would just, magic 8-ball the book and see where, flip through the pages and put my finger down and, okay, let's think about this thing. So yeah, in fairness to your question, maybe I am a deep thinker. Knowing myself as well as I do, however limited that may be, I deep may be very subjective considering the shallow end of the pool that I seem to like to enjoy some. But yeah.
For sure.
Good question.
Yeah, the encyclopedia is great, and that's one of the things I enjoyed growing up as well. And I don't know if you've taken advantage of the online encyclopedia nowadays, the Wikipedia, but yeah, definitely, it's always fun to go on there and just check out random subjects. I don't know why.
Yeah. Well, but Wikipedia doesn't have the smell of breaking open the binding of a really good book. Or there was just a unique smell even to an encyclopedia. And I know that sounds probably really weird, but I would just always loved the smell of cracking open some of those books and getting into them. But yeah, now that people got Wikipedia, why would anybody ever go buy a 34 volume? I think my parents probably paid $1,000 for that set of encyclopedias, nearly 40 years ago. And why would people do that now? But I don't know. Now that I'm thinking about it, I kind of need to find me a spot and get a whole set of encyclopedias. I bet I can buy them at a garage sale for $10.
Actually, you just gave me a great idea. Like you were saying, who would buy something like that? Gotta make it a collectible. You gotta find some way to make it a little bit special. And people do I think there's a niche market of people buying paperback still, and because they like that feel, they like that smell.
Yeah.
So whoever has
there's a textile value to it. I just recently finished a book, and I've got, you really can't see it here in camera, but I've got probably 40, 50 books over there. I've got 10 books on each side of me, and this is just a small portion. I like the textile feeling of breaking open a book and getting into it and getting a pen and getting a highlighter and marking it up. Now, don't get me confused. I love Kindle too, because there's advantages to being able to read in that digital format. But I think, when you look at a collection of books, you're not just looking at what a person's read, you're looking at what a person wanted to read. You're looking at something indicative of their interest. And most people, and certainly myself, I'll probably never read all the books that I have. It's just, people see a lot of the books like, have you read all those books? I'm like, oh yeah, I've read all those books, twice. Oh, wow. I'm like, no, come on, get real. But I have a healthy list of things that in my mind, if I have a chance, I'd love to get into those books, because, obviously readers are leaders. It's not really just a cliche thing. The vast majority of, assuming, some things about content, readers are leaders, because it opens one up to understanding things that in and of itself, the revelations that can come from reading the right things will, either in a positive or negative. There's been certainly less than stellar citizens of humanity that were influenced by what they read and then went out and did some amazing things. And I say that in fairness to their accomplishments, good or bad. They read, and it caused them to lead. So anyway, I'm getting further and further away from your question, but I'm a big fan of reading.
No worries. Don't feel like you're rambling on too much. This is really about you. So, feel free to keep going on. I do want to ask you, well, what's your favorite book? Or if that's too hard, knowing me or getting to know me through this interview, what book do you think I should read next?
Okay, so I can answer the first one really easily. My favorite book is the Bible, and it's not just because I'm religious or spiritual. The Bible, and this is not just my opinion. I mean, just a short few clicks in Wikipedia or Wiktionary or anything else the Bible in and of itself is a compendium of history, knowledge, wisdom. Most people that don't really read the Bible much would never understand how much the Bible talks about finances. So then there's certainly quite a few people that would attribute their ability to have gained wealth, even non-religious, non-spiritual people who could look at the Bible and say, look, if you'll just read the Bible, you can become wealthy because of what it teaches in terms of investment, saving, principles around stewardship, et cetera. So the Bible is easily my favorite book. And then what book would I recommend for you? So I'm just going to name a couple books and you can pick. I just finished a book written actually by a friend of mine, Dr. Eugene Wilson, wrote a book titled Rhythm, just like it sounds. And the book is about time management, attention management, and really at the highest level, life management. I highly recommend that for a lot of people. Nowadays we're increasingly busy, and certainly with someone like yourself who's working a podcast and working a job and living. How do I find that rhythm in life, that cadence that allows me to stay on beat, so that when interruptions come up, I have a plan on how to deal with them, how I can keep a lot of things in focus. So that's a good book. There's another book that I think a lot of people would find value in, a book titled Principles by Ray Dalio. And Ray Dalio is a very famous hedge fund manager. And the book's not so much about Ray's wealth, not at all. He does talk about investing in there, and I think that could be of interest to some people. But really, the book is about life and life principles, just some basic rules for living. And I give credence to Ray for taking the time to really be very self-reflective and answer questions that people had never really thought about. So those are two I would recommend. Trust me, I can talk about books for days on, what could help people. But I will throw this in, and this is something that people probably don't take enough advantage of nowadays is podcast. There's some really great podcasts that are out there by genre that if you listen, and as is the case with me, there's some podcasts I'll listen to and take notes around business or leadership. You'd be surprised what people will say vocally that they might not would have put on paper were they writing. And there can be just a tremendous amount of brilliance. And so, a lot of people will look at a big, thick book and go, I don't have time to read that. Okay, well, do you have 30 minutes to listen to a podcast? Can you squeeze 30 minutes in once a week? And if you can learn a whole lot. It's a different content that, 30 years ago, no one thought about that. But now it is really, truly a modality of learning that's available that, it doesn't matter if you can't afford to go buy books at $20 a pop. Man, podcasts are pretty much free. just hop on Spotify or whatever it is you listen to podcasts on and find some people that you really click with the way they think. Pay attention. You learn a tremendous amount on the fly. Even if you're not taking notes, driving back and forth to work or walking around your neighborhood can be a great way to learn through this new format.
No doubt. Thank you for that quality answer. I do want to mention rhythm. Exactly what I'm looking for, man. That's something that's been on my mind, and I've lately my decision making has been based around figuring out what my priorities are and how I'm spending my time and how I can get all those things to kind of move in harmony, so I don't feel like neglecting any of the things that I feel like I need to be doing.
That's your book. I mean, that book is all about what you just said, and you will find it to be. I mean, honestly, I have a lot of books. There's a lot of books I will never read once, so I most certainly very rarely ever read a book twice. And I went through that book 2.5 times, reading it and then going back through it and looking at what I had highlighted and sitting down with my calendar and my to-do list and just pretty much a blank sheet of paper and saying, okay, what do I do about this? Where do I put not just certain events, but a category of events in my life? And then, what do I think I want to do, 5 years out, 10 years out, if I still here 25, 30 years from now, what are some things? Because we leave a lot of stuff to chance. And life is not always favorable to those who leave things to chance. I gave a presentation earlier this week, and one of my co-speakers used a phrase several times. And we were speaking to some high school students, so I think his use of this phrase was very timely, but he said, luck favors the prepared mind. And there's a tremendous amount of truth to that. And so if there's certain things that matter, if it really matters, if it matters enough for you to think about it and put it down on a sheet of paper, then remind yourself, go back to that and say, okay, this matters. When do I think I want to prioritize time to get this done? Even if it's just in part, or planning on it. I can't do that this year. I can maybe not do it next year, but within the next 5 years, I want to do that thing. If you don't plan on it, odds are it's not going to happen. So anyway, you'll like Rhythm. You'll like the book.
For sure. No, planning, key word for me. That's something that I've neglected, and something I'm learning the value of more and more as I continue to grow. Just a heads up. Go ahead.
I was going to say, as a young man, you'll well serve yourself to do more of that now. You'll if you really do apply that now, your life will be so enriched in unimaginable ways, all because you applied what even seems like even just a trivial amount of intentionality for planning certain things. You'll do more, you will have greater peace of mind, and your life will just be so improved because you took the time to make that effort. So sorry.
No, you're fine. No need to apologize. But just a heads up, we do have about 5 to 7 minutes left in the podcast.
Sure.
I just want to thank you again for coming on, and man, I mean, you've been dropping knowledge all podcast long, so definitely appreciate all the nuggets. Let's try to get one more number in. Go ahead and
sure.
And would you like this one to close out with a hard level, or just keep it
moving?
Okay.
You know what? Let's go hard, and I'm gonna let you pick it.
Okay. This one's gonna be something that is the very first time I've used this question. I don't know if you saw the end of the document, but there's always questions that just pop up, and I have to kind of throw it in there. But it is, what is something that you self-diagnose yourself with? You know how sometimes people are like, oh, I have this phobia, or I'm OCD, or, I'm dealing. What is something for yourself that you're like, I think I might have that thing. If it's not too personal. Yeah.
No, it's not too personal. Again, as has been the case with several of the questions that you've asked me, it's not something I have even thought about thinking about. So, man, I don't know.
You can skip. If you feel like you'll get stuck, it's all right.
Well, I don't want to waste your time with me just rambling around trying to find an answer. I can tell you that I don't really have phobias. I'm certainly not a hypochondriac. I have learned things about me that have helped me change my nutrition and stuff. to, better myself. Credit and shout out to my wife. I finally started listening to her on at least a couple things. But no, I don't know that there's anything, but I will, trust me, I will meditate on that question later.
For sure. Let me switch it up for you. And this one is going to be, what is your mission?
Boy, that's a good one. Yeah, I don't know if we can cover that in 7 minutes, but I'll take a stab at it. And I don't want it to sound too cliche. I'm not, this isn't a beauty pageant, and I'm not trying to strive for world peace. I suppose, if anything, and this does maybe touch a little bit, on the more religious side, and that is, I want to help. I'd like to see people find their more. And we can take that from a spiritual side, come into a greater, relationship with God, stuff like that. But even if we kind of move that out of the spiritual religious, there's always a more. Everybody wants more. You get older, you have kids, you want more for your kids. You want them to have a better life. You want more. Certainly there's some people that their goals are, maybe their ambitions are just more money or, more house, more car, more stuff like that. And I'm not going to crash on that. I think most people probably mature out of that at some point. So if you go through a stage and that's what your more is, okay, knock yourself out. But if I can help people find the mores that really matter, and if I just, running up on time, I can leave this with you. I like to look at life through what I would describe as the rocking chair perspective. And by that, I mean, when you are at the stage of life where much, maybe even most of your time is spent sitting on the front porch in your rocking chair, watching the cars go by, what will matter then? Because it's probably not going to be most of the stuff that you spent most of your life working on. Your focus at that stage is going to become near singular in most respects. What's going to matter then is if we start thinking about that rocking chair perspective long before we get there and really prioritize our life around the things that are going to matter when we're gone, whether we're talking the eternal things of God or whether we're talking what's going to matter to my family when I'm no longer here. If we live life thinking about that, I mean, you can't think about this kind of stuff all the time every day, but if we live our life thinking about that, if I can help people become more reflective of that and more, if my mission can be to help them find their mission in that context, then I think maybe I can, go to my grave in peace.
Thank you for that. Everything you just said, I think I totally agree with, and I think you could already tell, our energy kind of vibes pretty well, being on the same page about that, trying to put people on. That's how I like to say it. Help them find whatever role that is that they want to play and kind of push them into embracing it and, finding their joy in that, in them knowing what that is for themselves. Not everybody, people are always searching for themselves, and it's for people to go out there, try to help other people find themselves, I think is definitely needed. And I think you'll find a lot of people that appreciate that from you as well.
Yeah, well, it's helpful, because a lot of people get too focused on perfection. And, perfect is a little lofty for most. Let's aim for ideal. If you aim for ideal consistently, you'll get pretty close to perfect.
Sure. I know I said there were 7 minutes left, but there is 3 more questions. I promise you they'll be quick. I think this next question is actually from a previous guest. Shout out to Mr. Kim out there. His question for you is, if you had to relocate for a year, where would you go and why?
If I had to relocate for 1 year, well, I've had the privilege of going to some nice places, but if it was one place and I was going to live there a year, and if somebody else was paying the tab, I would probably go to Sedona, Arizona. It's a beautiful place. The climate is great, a lot of outdoor activities. So yeah, I would, as the As the old story goes, if you're going to throw me in the briar patch, it's Sedona, Arizona.
Sedona, Arizona. I'm gonna have to stop by now. I haven't had the chance to really travel across the states, but now that you've put that in my consciousness, I know I'm gonna have to stop by.
There you go. Well, for you in California, it's not. I mean, you could be there in a whole lot faster time than I can from Texas.
No, I feel that. My next question for you is, what would you like to ask the next guest that comes on 34 Questions?
So you can throw this on your next guest. I'll give you this one. What do you think will matter most when you are within 1 week of the end of your life?
Just typing it out. What do you think will matter most when you're 1 week
from the end of your life?
1 week from the end of your life. I gotcha. Thank you for that question. Sometimes guests try to keep it light, and
yeah, well, given the flow of this conversation, why would we go light at this stage?
I appreciate that. And then my very last question is the question that I probably sent you in the message. The question that ties everything together is, what would you like your descendants to know about you 500 years from now? They're watching this video. What would you like them to know about you?
I'm going to answer that. I'm going to answer that this way. I did my best. And I hope that everyone understands that I did my best.
I gotcha.
Now, and I'll just, the context of that is, that's all you can do. All you can do is your best. And if you've truly tried to do your best, and I'm leaving that vague intentionally, but if you've tried to do your best and apply yourself as best as possible to the various stages of your life, and that really was your best, then you hope everybody can understand that was your best. And sure, maybe we can look at our life and we realize our best could have been better. If you do think that way, well, first of all, welcome to humanity. Most people recognize their best could be better. They hopefully hope it would be better. But if you can realize that, then that means that there's a little more best for you to aspire toward. So I'm going to try and do my best.
For sure. And, I can almost guarantee that they know that you're trying your best. Anything else you'd like to add before we get out of here?
No, hey, listen, I appreciate the opportunity to visit with you. Great questions, not just in, the form of the question, but the manner in which you present them. I think what you're doing here and, kind of sticking to a flexible script is going to really give, over time, a baseline. And I think it's great. I'm excited about what you're doing. You are going to be very enriched through this process. As you have a chance to kind of, get under the hood and pick the brains of different people. You're gonna hear a lot of great stuff that because it weaves itself into the fabric of your life, that you're going to be that much better for. So I don't know, maybe at some point, if you're taking good notes and go back through the podcast, you'll have some good material. Maybe there's a book in here somewhere. Or there's certainly going to be a snowball effect of these interviews that just get better and better as you go along. So hats off to you for what you're doing, and thanks for letting me be a part.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the juice. I definitely, for me, it's the long run. I'm not expecting for this to happen overnight or anything. And honestly, I think what I enjoy most about the podcast is that as far as finding rhythm, this is something that's, I think, has become my priority, and because it's these conversations that kind of make me feel alive, and make me feel like I'm doing something that's bigger than myself, and bringing people on to be a part of it is great. I've tried similar things in the past. It never felt right because I couldn't bring other people on with me, and but now this is definitely. I'm happy you recognize what's happening and what I'm trying to accomplish, and yeah, hopefully you'll get some enjoyment out of this. Get a kick out of it in 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and hopefully maybe you could come back on. I think I have a lot of questions to ask you about your books, the books that you like. I kind of want to start a book club out of this too. Just gotta figure out logistics of everything, but yeah.
Well, yeah, I'd be happy to circle back and spend some more time with you. This has been fun. And I'm going to be going to sleep tonight trying to self-diagnose my self-diagnostics. So thanks for that.
And feel free to ask, friends, family, these same questions.
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. That's going to be right at the middle of the dinner table. I'm going, what have you diagnosed yourself with? Because I think some things you need to certainly diagnose. Have you diagnosed yourself? No, that's going to be good stuff. I appreciate you giving me that little bullet to fire down the road.
No worries. I want to thank all the folks out there for tuning in, listening on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you catching this, and also on YouTube if you're watching. Thank you again, Mr. Darren Shelton, for stopping by. As always, reach out, reach forward, and much love.